battle for Narva plays a very important part in the Soviet-German war, because Narva is the gateway to Estonia. The Germans recognized the importance of holding Narva, and there were initially 12 divisions organized into what was called Abteilung Narva, a special force grouping which was to fight with enormous courage and distinction. The defence of Narva was a bitterly fought encounter. A breakthrough here would have compromised many German troops in the Baltic regions of Estonia and Latvia. European SS, along with the German regular army divisions, managed to hold back the forces of the Soviet Leningrad front throughout January, February and March. Their bitter attritional contest was not characterized by sophisticated tactical maneuvers. It was a bloody slugging match. The German formations were saved by the early spring thaw of late March 1944, which produced seas of mud floods of at least 1 foot deep in an area of 100 to 140 miles square. Even Soviet tanks stuck fast in the torrents of mud, and the German forces were able to retreat once more. The incredible resistance offered by Army Group Narva, a scratch formation drawn from the slender resources of Army Group North, represents an impressive example of military improvisation and stands comparison with the other German defensive battles fought elsewhere in Russia and Italy. The mainstay of resistance in Narva was the 3rd SS Panzer Corps, which included the long-serving SS Police Division, along with the new SS Viking Division, comprised of volunteers from different nationalities. By October 1944, the situation around Narva from a German point of view was hopeless. But unlike the countless garrisons squandered by Hitler in a pointless series of hold-at-all-costs orders, Army Group Narva managed to escape and rejoin Army Group North. Constant retreat was now the order of the day, as the Army Group was driven back through the Baltic states towards Germany. But Army Group North would never make it home. While the Red Army rolled on towards Berlin, the men of Army Group North were finally cornered in the Kurland peninsula of Latvia. There, the battered remnants of the Army Group held off all attacks by the Red Army for 6 long months. They were under siege from late October 1944 through to May 1945. In January 1945, the two armies which had served since 1941 as Army Group North were renamed Army Group Kurland. The hard-won mantle of Army Group North was transferred to a scratch assembly of beaten units, under the command of a swift succession of temporary leaders. The spirit of the men of Army Group North remained behind in Kurland. The German divisions which found their way to Kurland were stuck there. They were blockaded by the Russians, and there was nothing they could do. they could no longer make any useful contribution to the greater course of the war elsewhere. In many respects, it was a very wasteful and irresponsible gesture on the part of Hitler. This, albeit scratch army, was still a considerable force, but it was not to be made available. Despite everything that the besieged Red Army could throw at them, the surviving elements of the 16th and 18th Armies, now officially known as Army Group Kurland, continued to resist all further attempts to force them into surrender. Fighting for the Kurland Peninsula was grinding in nature. It was not like the Western and Eastern fronts, characterized by large formations sweeping along the frontier in impressive, sophisticated operations. In the Kurland fighting, the Germans trapped in this region were gradually, slowly and surely pushed back in spectacular fashion into something of a geographical cul-de-sac by the Red Army. They were well served to the bitter end by the ships of the Kriegsmarine, who managed to evacuate some divisions recalled to Germany. On occasion, they even managed to bring in some much-needed reinforcements. The German Navy did have an important role to play when the Red Army began to advance along the Baltic coast to break into East Prussia. Because, if at all possible, the German Navy had to try and contain Soviet naval operations. Even more importantly, they had a grievous burden to try and evacuate as many of the German civilians and German military units who had been trapped and transport them back into German territory. The naval aspect in the closing stage of the war does demonstrate that the German Navy could operate well, even in the face of disaster, which was now pending. The Kriegsmarine was absolutely vital in explaining why German formations fought bitterly to the end for the pointless battle for the Kurland Peninsula. The peninsula, from the Army's point of view, was militarily useless. Indeed, many German commanders in late 1944 and spring 1945 constantly requested Hitler to give up the Kurland Peninsula. This would release the 26 divisions that were fighting there, in order to bolster their defence in what were more important military regions nearer to home. The German Navy had used the Baltic Sea throughout World War II as a training ground for its submarine commanders. Dönitz, a committed Nazi who was in charge of the Navy at this stage, regarded the retention of the Gulf of Danzig in the Baltic Sea as essential in order to train his submarine commanders to use the extremely powerful new submarine, the Type 21, which the German Navy were developing towards the end of the war. The Kriegsmarine, therefore, played a critical role in explaining why the German formations fought so bitterly for the Kurland Peninsula. Trapped in Kurland, the survivors of the old Army Group North maintained their cohesion and fighting